Hello and welcome to another art house movie review. This time I'm reviewing the film Opening Night, directed by John Cassavetes. So I'm running out of superlatives for Cassavetes because I've done reviews of A Woman Under the Influence and The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and I love all of his films that I've seen so far. Cassavetes was a big gap in my film knowledge, and I have to say, he's now one of my favourite directors. And he's different than the type of director that I would normally consider my favourite, because my favourite directors tend to be auteurs who are making film as artwork and who have an element of poetry in the work. And I think that John Cassavetes is very different than the typical filmmaker that I would think was really brilliant and exciting, because he's very theatrical. It's kind of the golden age of Hollywood. He's at the tail end of that. He creates epic dramas. He works with classic Hollywood stars. And typically, although I could enjoy this type of film, it's not the type of film that I would think was fantastic. But at the same time, Cassavetes isn't just conventional. He's edgy, experimental. The writing is fantastic. And there's all kinds of ambiguity and levels of meaning in his work. These three films are just extraordinary. He's exploring big themes such as mental health, alcoholism, dysfunctional relationships, sleazy lifestyles. It certainly isn't just conventional kind of Hollywood fare. And I've really enjoyed all these three films, watching them in the past few days. But I have to say that Opening Night is clearly my favourite. I absolutely loved it. It's extraordinary as a film. I just think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's incredible that this film was criticised in the US and wasn't successful, and it's only after many years that it became recognised in the US as the great film that it is. As with Woman Under the Influence, the performance of Gina Rowlands is just fantastic. Here she's playing an actress, Myrtle, and like Mabel in A Woman Under the Influence, she seems to have serious mental health issues. Both these women, Mabel and Myrtle, are on the edge of sanity. But, saying that, they're very different characters. I didn't once think of Mabel when I was watching Gina play Myrtle in Opening Night, and this is just acting genius. So the story of Opening Night is, I think, it's about theatre, it's about celebrity, it's about acting, it's about audience, and Cassavetes really explores complex threads around all of these issues. And there really is this sense of three levels of reality in this film. We've got the film that we're watching, and we've got the play within the film, and then we've got real life outside the film, because of course Cassavetes and Rowlands were married. So one of the really interesting things in this film is the blurring of real life and theatrical life, and the character in the film, Myrtle, definitely, she doesn't have any boundaries between her life and her acting. There's a massive overlap, to the extent that sometimes she doesn't know what's real or not. There's an incredible recurring violence scene where the character Marty in the play hits Virginia, and the actors Maurice and Myrtle also have a relationship. So you've got these kind of two levels of relationship, which is just incredible. And being hit becomes too much for the actress Myrtle. The overlap between the acting and real life is just too much. And this is just so fascinating, because actually there's three levels of relationship here, because the actors in real life, Cassavetes and Rowlands were married. So you've got the three levels of relationship between these characters and actors, and it's complex, it's confusing, but it's just exhilarating. Each time we see that repeating scene, we're waiting for that slap, and I just found the tension and the intrigue just absolutely gripping. I love the ambiguity about whether something is in the play or not. David Lynch has to have been influenced by this in his film Inland Empire. And at times we just don't know if Myrtle is playing Virginia, the character in the play, or being herself, the actress. And there's so many issues that I think Cassavetes is addressing here. One of them being, how much does an actor have to become what they act? Myrtle doesn't want to age by playing an aging character. And Sarah, the writer of the play, says, just say the lines and Virginia will appear. In hearing actors in interviews over the years, some actors are like this. They just see acting as acting. They become the character and they switch it off. But not all. Some characters become, with method acting, and some characters become much more involved in their character. And I think that Cassavetes explores this in a really interesting way in Opening Night. As usual, we have close handheld camera work, which just is exciting. And again, I'm overusing these words, but exhilarating. The film opens straight into action before titles. And I really like this. It's the same in Woman Under the Influence. These days, when you watch a film, you sometimes have more than a minute of corporate logos of the production companies before anything starts. And in Cassavetes films, some of them, you're literally straight into the action. It's not a gentle easing into it. I love this. It caught me off guard. With both Woman Under the Influence and Opening Night, I had to check that somehow I hadn't missed a bit at the beginning. Cassavetes is unconventional and experimental, and I just think I love this. Something else that's incredible in this film is the audience. So we have an audience watching the play at the previews and then at the opening night. And the audience were made up of real people, of extras. They weren't actors, and apparently they were given no direction by Cassavetes. And it's just extraordinary because they are a really important part of the film, but it would seem that there was no input as to what they should do. So there is an extent to which they were a real audience. And of course, this is another blurring of reality in the film, in the sense that the audience would have been happy to see these great actors, Cassavetes and Rowlands and Ben Gazzara, and to see these amazing actors on stage. So there's an element to which they were really at the theatre. Just fascinating. What is this film about? I've been thinking about it so much since. It's definitely about theatre and acting in the way that I've been discussing. But the title of the play that they're acting in the film, Second Woman, it's about aging, it's about death, it's about Myrtle's life and the young girl that dies, and how Myrtle kind of relates to her, and this all fits together perfectly. I mean, there are many layers within this. I don't understand it all, but this just feels like a really coherent story, a theme. I see that some people have called this a horror film, and that's interesting. I think it definitely has horror elements with the second woman and the possible possession of Myrtle by this young person that dies. I'm not sure I'd call it horror, but there is something horrific about the whole film, and so in that way I think it is another dimension to it. Another thing that I think it's definitely about is kind of celebrity and audience. And I really wonder if Cassavetes is being really critical of audiences here, and of theatre in terms of celebrity, because Myrtle is really unreliable and she's terrible at her job, yet everyone seems to pamper her and bends to her dysfunction. And the audience loves her even when she's too drunk to act. And at one level, it just seems absurd. I mean, is Cassavetes criticising theatre audiences here? I must say, I'm not a big fan of theatre. And one thing that I don't like about theatre is how generous people are with their laughter. People know when they're supposed to laugh. And I really felt that this was present here. And it's just fascinating because this audience weren't told to do this, but they started laughing at this interaction between the actors in the play when she's really drunk at the end. And that's just fascinating. And the play is a mess, especially, it's a mess all the time, but especially on the opening night. And it's really hard to imagine the audience actually enjoying this. But they did, because to some extent they were a real audience. And again, just fascinating. There are a couple of things that I don't understand. Firstly, the end music is definitely optimistic, and it just threw me off because it doesn't really fit with the ending of the film. It's a little bit like Woman Under the Influence, so I have to believe it's a deliberate decision, but I think Cassavetes just isn't conventional and is sometimes just going to pull the rug away from you. The other thing that I didn't really understand was the wife of the director of the play, Manny. She had a strange presence in the film, and I particularly wasn't convinced that she would be so taken with the final performance. Given what we'd seen of her character before, it just seemed a little bizarre. These are only small things, and I just think it's probably the nature of a Cassavetes film that you don't necessarily, everything doesn't just sit comfortably together. I have to say that by the time of the actual opening night of the play in New York, I was absolutely gripped by this film. I just couldn't wait to see the performance. And it's very rare that I'm as excited and as thrilled as this in a film. I was just, in a really interesting state. The final act is like we're shown the performance of the play almost as if we're seeing it in real time. And this goes on for about 30 minutes, and the final version of the play is quite different than what we've seen in the previews. It's confusing, it's messy. I'm not sure whether we're supposed to think that she pulled off a great performance or not. I mean, some of her facial expressions were great acting. It's like even drunk, she had the instinct of being able to work her face in a way that the audience would react to. But in other ways, it was just a terrible performance. But I just really like all of this. Cassavetes, he doesn't make it easy for the viewer, but you know you've experienced something with real heft. As a filmmaker, he is just absolute genius. And this is one of my favourite films ever. I've just loved thinking about it in order to put these thoughts together. It's just fantastic. There are no words really to express how much I enjoyed this film. So I couldn't recommend this film more highly. And it's actually streaming in the UK on the BFI player, and it's coming up on Mubi on the 13th of July. So there are plenty of opportunities to see it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.